Okay, so we are going to record this for folks that can't make it. I want to thank Abby Peel, whom I think everybody can see, who's helping us produce this and get it going. And I want to thank, of course, my wife, Miranda, and Justice Broderick, and all of you guys for joining this call. Abby, you're getting all these admits. I guess I'm co-host. I'm seeing a lot of them. But
yes, you can ignore them.
Okay. I just want to try to set this so that I can see everybody. I see non-video. Anyway,
Here, I can.
I'll stop messing around. This is the first in a series of 10 parent webinars, and Judge and I are extremely excited to get this going. Let me just begin with some housekeeping. If you're here, this first one is free to the public, anybody, and I hope you shared the link. Some school systems have purchased all 10 in the series for all the parents in the district. If you're one of those, we look forward to having you in as many of these as you can make. They're every second and fourth Tuesday of the month. If you came on through another means, you heard about it through somebody else, if you'd like to continue the next time we have this going, Abby's going to post the information in the chat about how to find out about the series, how to get in touch with me. Justice Broderick, if you like, you can post your email in the chat. And that's just about housekeeping. Forgive me, I have some notes. I don't want to forget anything, so I'm gonna stay with that. You can post questions, obviously, in the chat. We're going to show a video in the middle, and we love your reactions to this video. I see Frank McBride from Goffstown. I think, Frank, some of you have seen the video. Hi, Frank. But we love your reactions. And we're going to leave 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers, remembering that this is the first in a series of 10 about the mental health challenges that young people are facing. And frankly, how we as adults, parents, teachers, coaches, grandparents can collaborate and continue this conversation and in fact, install some common sense solutions. So let me just jump in. I'm going to just make some introductory remarks, and then Justice Broderick is going to speak for a bit. We're going to show the video. After the video, I'm going to attempt to make some sense about how we got here from a psychological perspective. I'm just by way of introduction, I'm Jeff Levin. I was a school teacher in the 80s and then went back to school and got a master's in social work, and have been a counselor for 37 years, teacher before that. Have worked with young people every day of my life, Monday through Friday, since 1980. Let me, and John will introduce himself, John, when you speak. So let me get into this. I find myself extremely nostalgic watching clips of Don Rickles on The Tonight Show, watching Remember the Titans for the 40th time, listening to the Allman Brothers and B.B. King. And I realized why I do that, because I think when we grew up, things were easier. And the biggest point I'd like to make is that we learn through osmosis, through our home, the Boys and Girls Club, our friends' moms, our schools, the YMCA, the institutions, religious institutions. We learned how to find our voices, how to find those intangibles that we'll talk about later that equipped us to be capable, happy, connected adults and deal with curveballs. This generation is growing up in a very different time. My wife insisted, I want to see if I can find my mask very quickly. I use this prop when I work with kids and get a laugh out of it. But I have the snorkel, but I'm not going to get it. But the air that we breathed back in the day, I look good, Justice, with this?
You look great, Jeff.
Thank you, appreciate that.
You actually look better with that on.
The air that we breathed back in the day and the waters through which we swam were just easier to find your way. And I think you wouldn't be on this call if you didn't agree with that. So I think it's irrefutable that kids are a little bit adrift, or maybe a lot adrift. And we want to talk about that. And as Judge says, redesign the intersection instead of hiring more counselors and more ambulances. We want to redesign the intersection. So Just a couple of more remarks. Again, we wouldn't be here if we weren't concerned with stress and anxiety levels, with school shootings and all this nonsense. And if we listen to the kids, they will tell us that they're not doing well. Frank, did you teach history back in the day by any chance? You muted, Frank. You muted, Frank McBride.
No, I'm not. 25 years ago, or 22-ish, 23-ish.
You taught history? You taught history?
I did.
How long was the Iron Age, approximately?
You're going to put me on a spot here in front of, what are we talking, 63 people? I said it's a quarter century since I taught it, but
100 years, 500 years?
it's not 500. I'm going to go with that.
100?
A little under, right?
I don't know,
Yeah.
but it took a while.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution, the steam engine, the cotton gin took 50, 75. The digital age, we haven't caught up with the effects of the devices, of the increased stress, of the rapid change, the fear, and the time famine, real or perceived. No one on this call is at fault, but that doesn't change the fact that our kids are really struggling. And so as a community of adults, parents, coaches, and so on and so forth, it's really our opportunity to acknowledge the mental health crisis and to acknowledge it within ourselves and get ready to do something about it, okay? So I want to introduce Justice Broderick, and John will have 10 or 15 minutes to tell about his journey. And after that, I'll come back on. Actually, after that, we're going to show the video, right? And then I'll come back on, and then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for a discussion. Sound good, Abby? I'm privileged to introduce my good friend and one of the finest guys I've ever had the privilege to know and work with, Justice John Broderick.
Jeff, thank you. And thanks everybody for joining tonight. My only regret is that we're not able to do this in person and that I don't have more time. I may be the last guy on earth to be doing what I'm doing tonight, but I made mistakes in my own family. I didn't see mental illness for what it was. And it took us on a journey that I wouldn't wish on another living soul. It happened in a very public way when I was on the state Supreme Court. My master's educated, funny, smart, talented son ended up in the state prison. And I ended up in the ICU at the Elliott Hospital. And through the grace of God and the skill of a lot of good people, when our journey took us where it took us, we were finally told what my son's problems were. And we were advised that his drinking was self-medication. That wasn't his problem, really. His problem was anxiety and depression that were described to us as virtually off the charts. And when we found that out in that place, we knew that we had failed him. And I take responsibility for that. I'm a baby boomer. No one talked about mental health when I was growing up, probably true in your life too. But I'm a lot smarter now about it. And my son, who was drinking almost every day for years, has not had a drop of alcohol in over 15 years. And I love him, and he's taught me so much about mental health. And he's proud of what I'm doing, by the way, and that makes me proud to be doing it. But I really want to spend about 10 minutes tonight, if I can, talking about what I've seen and what I've learned, because it may be your child or your child's friend. 5.5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, I got involved in a campaign on mental health awareness. It wasn't my idea, but it was a genius idea. But I could see the genius of it. And when I was asked to get involved, I did. New Hampshire was the first state in the country. And so I jumped in, which was surprising because I never talked about my family's struggles and my mistakes. But I got involved. Over the last 5.5 years, I've driven now almost 100,000 miles on my car throughout northern New England. I've spoken to almost 100,000 kids, ages 11 or 12 through high school. It has so opened my eyes. I've been to 250 to 300 middle schools. I've hugged thousands of kids who have approached their grandfather they've never met, who made himself vulnerable and open and promised he wouldn't judge them or blame them or shame them. And they have so touched my life. I want to tell you a little bit about that journey and about these kids. They may be your children or children of people you know. I would say right now in the United States, high school and middle school kids are under more stress than ever before. My childhood and theirs could not be more night and day. Parents are under more stress, by the way, than my parents ever were and that I was. It's a very different world for parents, too. We're all moving at the speed of light. We're all multitasking every day. The line between school and home and work and home has been so blurred that it's hard sometimes to know the difference. When I first went to high schools, I wasn't sure the kids would listen to someone my age, particularly talking about mental health awareness. That's not a topic that necessarily I thought they'd listen to. And the first time I spoke was at Pembroke Academy outside of Concord. It was 9 a.m. on a fall morning. I was in the gym, no floor, no chairs on the floor. The kids were in bleachers on both sides. I was on a riser under one of the baskets behind a fixed podium with a gooseneck microphone. I wasn't sure they could even hear me, these kids, but I was there and I promised to speak, and I spoke for 35 minutes. I could hear my own voice, but I wasn't sure they could. Acoustics are not great in gymnasiums. And when I finished speaking, the principal who was standing behind me got up on the riser. There was dead silence in that gym. It looked like an oil painting. And I thought these kids didn't hear me. They don't care what I'm saying. Maybe they couldn't even hear what I was saying. And after about 3 or 4 seconds of dead silence, which seemed like a minute or more for me, suddenly those 840 kids stood up on both sides of that gym. They started applauding and whistling. And they applauded for more than a minute. It was stunning. I said to the principal, it's not about me, I know that. That's not what they're applauding. These kids are saying, I agree with you. Why aren't we talking about this? In the years that followed, I went to so many schools. I think I've done what no one in New England has ever done. No one's been to more schools than I have, certainly not talking about mental health awareness. And I doubt anyone alive has hugged as many kids as I have in public schools. And it's changed me. 1 out of 5 adolescents will have a mental health problem in their lifetime. 1 out of 5 adults, too. Anxiety and depression are epidemic among young people. I know that now. The statistics say it, but I can prove it now. It doesn't matter, by the way, whether I speak at a private school or a public school or a wealthy school or a poor school district. It doesn't matter. I've spoken to 30,000 adults. Some of them are doctors, some of them nurses, some of them are business people. The stories they tell me about their own families or their colleagues when I finish speaking would really open your eyes. I wish you could be with me on those days when I speak in schools. It is the most humbling thing I have ever done. And I feel a duty to these kids to let you know what they're dealing with, what they're feeling, Sometimes I hug varsity athletes who are crying. Sometimes I hug sixth graders who tell me they're going to kill themselves. I have kids come up to me after my talks with wide eyes and cracking voices. Sometimes they can barely speak. Sometimes they'll say, I have so many expectations on my back. Thanks for sticking up for kids like me. I didn't know that. I know it now. And I believe that the problems these kids are facing are problems we can all address. I'm not a clinician, so please understand that. And I know there are many reasons and explanations for mental illness, and it comes in many shapes and forms. But a lot of what I'm seeing in schools, from what the kids tell me, is because of the stress they're under, the anxiety they feel to succeed. They're fearful of disappointing. They're scared to death of failure, however they define it. And they are so scheduled and so engaged in school and extracurricular activities and sporting activities. I'll tell you a story about a girl who approached me in Southern Maine, high school student. She said to me that afternoon, she waited 40 minutes to speak to this perfect stranger who had spoken to her class. She came up, she looked so sad, and she said to me, I'm in all advanced placement classes here at the high school. And she looked so glum. And I said, well, there should be a law against people like you. Nobody should be that smart. And she didn't smile very much. And she said, it's not that good, you know. And I said, why is that? She said, well, I study every night till 11:30. I have no life, she told me. She was a junior in high school. That was not my junior year in high school, and I'll wager it wasn't yours either. And I said, well, I'm sure your parents love you very much. Have you talked to them and told them what you told me? She said, no. I said, well, you promised me that you'll talk to them. And she didn't answer me, but she stepped forward and hugged me, this girl. And then she ran down the hallway. I doubt she ever spoke to her parents. I had an eighth grade girl come up to me after I spoke at her middle school. She said, I freak out if I don't get 100 on every paper. I said, well, why don't you use my standard? She said, what? I said, well, if I got an 85 or above, I thought that was great. I said, I only had 5 100s in high school. She said, how would you remember that? I said, if you only had 5, you'd remember them. And she laughed. It's an everyday, everywhere problem. I've had so many kids tell me that they're ashamed. Or sometimes they tell their parents. It's usually the father, by the way, who gives this answer. I'm not being critical. I might have given it too, but I wouldn't today. A little girl told me she told her dad about her depression and anxiety. And I said, what did he say? She said, he told me he didn't believe in mental health problems. I should just get over it. That's not the answer, by the way, but that's the culture. That's the culture. And so my mission, really, and I'm the last person I know that would have this mission, but it's become the most important work of my entire professional life. And I don't say that lightly. I was Chief Justice of our Supreme Court. I was Dean of the Law School at UNH, and those were important and responsible jobs. This means more to me. This means a lot more to me than anything I've ever done. And my plea to parents is, could we start a conversation? Could we normalize it, demythologize it? And after generations of silence and stigma and shame, talk about it. And change will come. Change will happen. And I met Jeff Levin 2 or 3 years ago. He's been doing this work professionally, as he said, for over 3 decades. And Jeff has been seeing this change now for 15 or 20 years. I can tell you what I've seen over the last 6 years, and it's fixable. If we want to fix it, it's treatable, but not if we don't address it. And so my plea to parents tonight is to continue to monitor these podcasts and to participate in them when you can, because our kids are depending on it. That much I do know. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. And And I'm looking forward to watching the video, which will be shown now. And these kids will tell you what I'm telling you. And then Jeff Levin will talk. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks, Judge. And please feel free to put some reactions in the chat. I know it's common practice to not have cameras on, so it's hard to see how people are reacting. It's difficult to talk to an audience. It's just challenging, but we'd love to see your comments in the chat. And if you want to turn on your camera, that'd be delightful. And remember, at 7:45, I'm going to stop and we're going to have a discussion. So can you screen the video, please, Abby? I think your sound's off on. Yeah, we're not getting any sound at it. Thousands. What are the most stressful things you find about being a kid today in the 2000s?
The pressure of being successful is definitely one of them. Junior year, especially, is really difficult. I can speak for everyone when I say this, that everyone feels stress that realistically that they shouldn't.
I think that a lot of people like smoke and do drugs.
Yeah,
like,
that are our age.
and they were
People judging other people. Like, judging here is so bad.
the things people say, like the racism, like, you know, people like are like, they like judge you for like what you do or like how you do your hair or like what kind of shirt you wear.
We don't talk about like how some things that you see online, that you see every single day, are just, you shouldn't expect yourself to live up to those standards. You know?
I feel like I'm kind of never like well rested. Like I feel like there's always something that has to be done. Like there's no actual time to like relax.
It's balancing everything that needs to get done with school and work and all the extra activities that we're trying to do, and then not having enough rest.
And it's kind of because I feel like the older generation didn't grow up with this sort of stress, and they never experienced it, and they don't really know how to deal with it.
You don't need a big sign to tell you that that person wants to kill themselves or they're not happy with themselves. Little signs can just tell you. A person not eating, a person not talking to their friends as much, avoiding school, not cleaning your room. Little signs like that, people need to notice that.
Just kids want to live and have fun and do other things to school, and that there's more to success than getting all A's and graduating with high honors and going to the best college that you can. Some of the most successful people in the entire world are successful because they do things that they like and they are good at it. And I can tell you, a lot of people don't like school, and it's probably for the best if every now and then you ease off the gas pedal and let them find time to do something that they enjoy, that they would actually like to pursue.
You got top part 2 coming up.
You know, people always assume that you're going to have your phone on you, and it seemingly is becoming more and more of an issue when you don't. When obviously we know from both empirical studies and just from personal experience that having your phone on you can be dangerous, and it can lead to a lot of problems both mentally and physically. And so it's unfortunate that we all feel this dire connection to our phones.
We never really experienced going out and being individuals without being in contact with our parents when we actually had the abilities to take on those responsibilities and freedoms. I would say, especially in school and in the environment that we're in, there's definitely always that feeling to be perfect in almost all aspects of life. And I see so many people around me who are getting into colleges, getting into their dream schools, doing what they've always wanted to. And it doesn't even seem like they're that much happier, like feeling accomplished.
And also the time that I do find myself where it's unscheduled, I find myself worrying about the time that is scheduled.
To try not to put too much pressure on your kids. I think the most important thing for parents to do is to at least give kids the right values and morals that you want them to grow up living with. But then outside of that, you should really try to let kids be kids and let them figure some stuff out for themselves. We live in a time that it's so hard to make mistakes because we see people that once you make a mistake, you get canceled or whatever it is. And you have to find ways to allow your kids to make mistakes in settings that isn't on the internet or isn't something public, so that they're able to grow up and learn and become their own person and figure out what they do and do not like to do. Because if not, then they're just going to follow what the internet tells them so they could avoid being canceled and do what they think they want when really they never grew up figuring out what they truly love.
It goes back to the baby touching the hot stove. You can tell him as many times as you want not to touch it, but he's not going to know it's bad unless he actually touches it and, yanks his hand back. And I think that's kind of been lost on our generation.
Eli, do you think sometimes parents are living vicariously through their children?
Yeah, 100%. I think that not only are they living vicariously through the children, but they're trying to nitpick every mistake that they might have made when they were children. And if the kids never get the opportunity to make those mistakes, I'm not saying, let your kid walk into an utterly dangerous situation, but there has to be some sort of balance and some sort of leeway where you let the kid understand what it means to do this and what it means to make that mistake so that he doesn't do it again.
It's all about the students being better than each other rather than if we all learned it together.
So I thought of the train as, you could really sum it up to anything. You could say it's the train of life, the train of society, big words. But I think truthfully what it is it's a constant pressure to be moving forward on one track, and everybody's kind of just trying to stay on. You're not the conductor of your own train. You're not laying the tracks. You don't know where it's going. It's at a set speed during, finals week. The train's going really fast, and you just have to do your best. Some people fall off the train. Some people stay on, hanging on by a thread. But the real issue is that it's not like everybody has their own train, which is the way it should be. It's not everybody's laying their own tracks. It's one train. We don't really know who it's set by. We don't know why it's going so fast, but that's what it is, and you kind of just have to keep up. And that's a real big pressure for kids. It seems more and more that our generation experiences general anxiety. It's not really clear where it's coming from. There's no pinpointed action that was taken to get there. And so for me and Isaac, I think that it can be, the stress of a test or that's one thing, but just you show up to school and it's an anxious place. Everybody around you is anxious, first of all, so that rubs off. And just you feel like you're in that building to do something and you don't really know what it is. And so it's a general anxiety that feels very, very stifling. And it's very disorienting because, like I said, if you don't know where it's coming from, it's really hard to treat. You can't just say, oh, this is what you should do. Talk to somebody about this because you don't know why it's happening. It just is. And it's affecting everybody around you.
But I think the larger problem here is the fact that people are just feeling anxious every day. And it doesn't have to be because of a scarring experience or a tragic event. It's just how we grow up as anxious people. And honestly, part of it could be the phone. It could be the constant chase to be better.
But I think that the issue is that we kind of let the technology dictate the pace. We let this come into the world and we weren't prepared for it. And so you see that now that people are scrambling to get a hold of this. People are just now realizing that Facebook is invasive and that it invades your privacy. That's been going on already now for 13 years. And the major issue, we talk about the train analogy, is that one of the conductors up there is technology.
Sorry for the abrupt ending there. I'll wait for Abby to.
As soon as other teams.
Oops. You know, my instinct is to try to get a discussion going at this point, honestly, because I've watched that video. As you can tell, I edited the second half where it ends abruptly, so don't send me to Hollywood. But every time I watch it, I'm doing this. I'm thinking, oh my God, we've got to find a way to help these kids. And we're so psyched there are 80 something participants on this first of 10 webinars. So I promise I'm going to be quiet by the latest 7:45, but and please use the chat. I've learned to multitask. When email came out, I told my wife I don't want to use email, but I find myself a champion of this Zoom platform. How did we get here? I think one of the best ways to think about this is if you think of the very granular felt difference of your childhood. I see my friend Coach Morrissey's childhood in Connecticut, or the judge's childhood, or Olga's childhood. I'm reading names. What are the biggest differences between your childhood, and I see a golden retriever now, happily. What are the biggest differences between your childhood and the childhood of your kids? And either I'd love to just get a couple of people to raise your virtual hand or just pitch in or type something in the chat. Would anybody be willing to respond to that question real quick? John Morrissey, go ahead.
Hi, Jeff, and glad to be part of this. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, you and I have worked together for a few years, and it's much different. We could go out and sort of find our own way. We played pickup games in the neighborhood. No, I'm really sounding like an old guy here, but there weren't adults to pick the teams and buy the uniforms and do all of that. We had a lot more autonomy than these kids have. And I think, as you know, those young men and women very eloquently stated in your video, you know, they feel like they're pawns in a game where people are keeping score, and they're, you know, people's child's accomplishments or lack thereof is part of this huge scoreboard that people are using to feel better about their own lives. And the judge asked a very good question, I think, of one of the young people. You know, do you think parents are living vicariously through their kids? And I think that's definitely the case. I probably have been guilty of that, if I'm being honest, you know, with my own kids. So yeah, our upbringing was much different. And these kids are under a tremendous amount of pressure, and anything that we can do to try to alleviate that, you know, I'm all for. That's why we brought you in to work with our baseball team at Middlesex School, Jeff. And it's been, you know, an incredibly positive experience for our players. And I can see, you know, a big change that has happened in the kids in the couple of years you've been involved. So
did I give you that check before the Zoom call? If you look, thanks, Coach. But if you look at the chat where people are warming it up here, the first, Tracy said freedom, biggest difference. Lisa, outside much more. Look at the chat, time to be bored. Played outside, no cell phones, the chance to make mistakes and learn for ourselves from them. Independence. And Tammy makes a long comment. Less people watching and judging. Thank you, John and Jeff, for visiting the school, but we had more social enjoyment. I grew up running around my neighborhood playing with friends for hours. We had high standards, but my mistakes weren't advertised on any platform. And it goes on. The last one, more social connection, face-to-face and outside safety, right? So the overwhelming tragedy list, which includes global warming, political divisiveness, opiates, what am I forgetting? I used to know that there were 7. Device addiction, all of it. The next comment, no staring at devices like drones. We had to use our imaginations more. Boredom is the chance for creativity. So the 80-something grown-ups 88, we're up to 88. My wife's taking me to a dinner if we get to 100. Less homework, I love it. Less homework. I watched every Bruins game. I stared at clouds. I asked kids today, do you stare at clouds? They look at me like, is this guy doing, is he having a flashback from the 70s? Stare at clouds, we don't have time. So this is a psychological nightmare. And I want to introduce, I just want to say, so the stuff we all did in the chat, right? We can recreate that for kids. We won't get it exact, but if we collaborate community by community, school by school, and that's what the Reconnection Project is about, is to get in front of parents, teachers, and kids and put this thing back together. More homework that made sense. We had handwriting, yes. So I too sound like the old guy. These kids, they print, they look like they've, had their knuckles broken by Don Nicoleone, and they print, and I say, can you not handwrite? And they say, handwrite, what is that? What's the point of handwriting? I have an iPhone, and so that's it. So we have to teach these kids what we learned by osmosis. We have outcome fever. We have the overwhelming tragedy list. We have a new parenting playbook that Coach Morrissey got caught up in by his own admission. The other night I was in the warmer weather. I was riding my bike through my hometown at dusk, and I thought of my wife thinking, Jeff, you don't have a light on your bike. What are you doing? And I remember riding my bike at 10:30 at night, and my imagination was on fire. So let me introduce the idea that we've overprotected and underprepared kids. So when I get calls, which I get all the time from college kids who drop out, COVID didn't help, but the calls were coming before this, right? I think, what are we doing wrong? We have to redesign the intersection. I'm an ambulance driver, but John and I, we want to redesign intersections with you guys. Okay, so I'm almost done here. This overprotection model, it results in outcome fever. John mentioned a little girl who couldn't tell her parents, hey, I don't feel good. I was talking to a kid on Zoom today, the kid's 19, he was crying. I said, Carter, why didn't you tell your parents? I can't, I don't know, I can't. Now, we all had secret lives when we were 14, 15, 16, but if we were in trouble, we would tell some adult. The other day, John and I were somewhere, Judge might remember, we asked the kids, it was at a public high school where we did a video of kids that should be forthcoming. We asked these 8 kids, how many kids do you think in your friend group have a trusted adult that you would confide something near and dear to your heart to? And John, what was the answer? Do you recall?
I do, Jeff. The answer was about 20% of the classmates had a trusted adult in whom they could confide. That was shocking.
Right. Shocking. So outcome fever is real, and the messaging of achieve, 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 achieve means if I don't feel good inside, right, I'm not achieving. I'm not happy. Something's wrong with me. I can't tell anybody. There's a local college in Mass. They have had 8 suicides. You might have read this in the Globe. 8 suicides since August, and this is the tip of this disturbing iceberg. So let me talk about solutions. My wife is holding up a cue card in the doorway of my office. Solutions. We want to bring back the 6 I's, okay? And we can do this. If Abby, you have that 6 I's sheet? And trust me, we're going to have 9 more of these, and there's 88 people on this. We'd love to have 176, double it next time. So let me talk about these 6 I's if Abby can share her screen. You got that? And this is borrowed from, oh, it's moving. Can you show those happy kids at the bottom? Right? This is somewhat borrowed from a theoretician named Eric Erickson. So we need imagination, right? We need to feel increasingly independent as we go from 6 to 8 to 10 years old to 12 to 14 to 16 and 18. And when we matriculate in college, we don't want to be texting our moms and dads every day, right? We want to build imagination and independence. Guts begins with G, so it's not one of the 6 I's, but intestinal fortitude is. Hope you're laughing. These kids lack resilience. Talk to any coach in the country. These kids lack resilience because we haven't let them fail. We've overprotected them. You know, I was joking with Miranda. I got a paper cut taking stuff to the dump the other day, and it's been hurting me, and I've been liking it. I thought, yeah, I cut myself. That may sound strange, Frank. I may need some help, but right. But we're overprotecting our kids, and they're not developing intestinal fortitude. By for integrity, I do mean honesty. I do remember cheating on my homework once in a while in the 60s and 70s, and I remember my teacher catching me and chiding me very deeply. 80% to 90% of high school kids are into sexting. I don't think that's an activity that reeks of integrity. But I also mean the integrity of the identity and the ego. Okay, makes sense? Number 5 is intimacy. Really and truly getting close to people. And the 5th is identity. If you don't have all 5 of these, you don't get to that solid identity. So I've just gotten the same cue card. What can you do? Thanks, Abby. What can you do, right, to teach these kids these 5 I's? We feel that the answers are at our fingertips, and it's not rocket science. We need honesty. The first thing I would suggest, and you guys jump in and Miranda can jump in as well, is talk to your kids and listen without judgment, right? When you came home from school, your mother probably said, John, how was your day? How you doing? She meant the question. Turn off the phones. Have a ritual in your house where you turn off the phones every Tuesday and Thursday from 6 to 10. If your kids are older than 12, they will act as though they hate you. But on the second night, when you're playing Monopoly and you're hanging around and you say, hey, let's have an adventure outside and do a, what do you call that? A treasure hunt on this moonlit night. And they're going to be like, wow, really? I talk to audiences of kids all the time. When you name this problem of all these digital age elephants and you suggest solutions and you just listen, these kids light up. And that's the biggest suggestion I can make. And Miranda, if I've forgotten something, I'd love you to let me know. But that's the first and biggest. We need honesty. We need collaboration. We need to listen to our kids. And we got to keep these conversations going. Last thing, and then I'll shut up for 7:45. And again, if I've forgotten something, John or Miranda, let me know. As far as solutions go, this is the first of 10 seminars. Listen and shut down the phones and model what you want. You complain to your kids, get off your phone. Why do you have your phone under the table at dinner looking down like this? Well, what do? I mean, I have a flip phone and I will acknowledge to you I'm addicted to it. It's the first thing I look at in the morning. It's the last thing I look at night. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but my guess is out of the 88 people on here, 90% of us are addicted to the thing. So let's I'm going to read the other chats, but can we get a little bit of a discussion? I'd love you to turn your camera on. I'd love you to I don't know, Abby, can you raise your virtual hand in this silly game here?
You might be able to, or people can directly message to me, Abby Peel, if they want, and I can read it. There was one good question. It says, Judge Broderick, was it a big shift from judging people to acting without judgment?
That's actually a great question. I think it's just a very different experience. It's very liberating too, by the way. Over the last 6 years, I have learned more about people, especially young people, than I learned during the rest of my life. Because when you're listening and not talking, And when you don't have to solve every problem, which I did when I was a judge, I had to have an answer to every problem. I don't have an answer to every problem now, but I do know from my experience for 5.5 years that what Jeff Levin just told you, I think, is so true. We need to talk to our children, but more so, we need to listen to them. I want to share one anecdote with you. I spoke at a middle school one day before COVID, and I had lunch with 8 eighth grade girls. You can imagine how thrilled they were to have the old guy interrupting their 22-minute lunch, but I did. And they were pretty nice to me. And I said to them at one point, "Hey, I hear your generation is stressed. Is that true?" And they suddenly were smiling at me like, this old guy knows more than we thought. And they said, "We are so stressed." And I said to them, "Why is that?" And the girl next to me, who was the best athlete in the school, I was told, boy or girl, she said, "I'll tell you why we're stressed. We're always trying to accomplish the next thing, so we'll be eligible for the thing after that." I guarantee you that was not your eighth grade life. It wasn't mine. The last thing I want to tell you, Jeff Levin and I were in Nantucket. We went to Nantucket in November, so nobody suspects you of going on vacation if you go to Nantucket in November. So we talked to kids. The oldest kids were eighth graders. And we asked this question of about 50 of them. We said, if I could promise you, these are 6th, 7th, 8th grade children. If I could promise you an 89 on your next test, you can pick the subject and you won't have to study anymore, but you'll get an 89. Or you can study all night long the night before the test and you'll get a 90. How many of you would study all night long? Every single hand went up. It was shocking. And then when the hands went down, a little boy raised his hand. He said, "What would I need to do to get 100? That's what Eli and Isaac were saying. That was not my life. I wager it wasn't your life. These kids believe that in the 7th grade, the difference between an 89 and a 90 on a math test or a science test is going to matter for the rest of their life." And I want to say, without blaming anyone, I'm not blaming people, please understand that. It's cultural. We are ratcheting up pressure on these kids. They think the finish line is the graduation from high school. They think there's a difference in your life if you have a 3.4 average or a 3.6 average in the 12th grade. I didn't think that. And all of us need to take a step back, I think. Jeff Levin, to my money, is on the mark. I've seen it over and over. And kids model what they see, and their parents who are trying to be good parents. I don't doubt that at all. We're all too busy. We're all too occupied. We saw a family. I'll shut up after this. My wife and I were out to dinner before COVID. Family came in, mother, father, 4 daughters. The oldest is about 13, I would say. And my wife said, "Look at that family." And they'd just been seated, and I looked over, and every one of them was on their device. We stayed there for another 15 minutes before we left. That family had not spoken. When I went out to dinner, which was not often in my middle-class family, my mother and father and my sister, everyone talked. My parents talked to each other. I listened to them. They talked to us. Their friends would come by and meet their friends. I didn't like that part very much, but I did meet their friends. And I learned a lot. Social emotional growth happens eyeball to eyeball. It doesn't happen by looking at the palm of your hand. And those of us who grew up at a different time know that and benefited from it. These kids don't know what those times were. That's on all of us. And we need to address it. And we can if we choose to.
And John, thank you. You know, one of the clear conundrums is time. You know, I think that, hi Larry Elliott, I think that 6 or 8 school districts purchased this opportunity so many thousands of parents were, you know, you see 88 people on here. and we need to keep this going. We're pressured, there's way too much going on, but John Broderick and I, we feel like we're naming elephants, and these elephants aren't happy. And so we implore you, I put my email, John, you can put your email number in the chat if you want, if you know how to use the chat on
You're giving me,
Zoom, right?
Jeff, you're giving me way too much
I
credit.
know it. I can put it in there, or Abby can put John's contact. But Tracy made it and said, look, I'm trying to do some of these things. And I think, Tracy, you meant reduce the screen time with my children, but it seems they are almost ostracized by their peers. I assume you mean if they don't have the gizmo on, right? Tracy, you can chime in if you want. She writes, it's brutal as a parent as well. Tracy, did you want to say anything about that? Are you still here? Tracy, going once, you're muted. The tension of the person who's muted.
Okay, so I unmuted myself.
There you go.
It's really tough. I mean, we try to take the screens away and we try to do all of that stuff. We do all the outside stuff. We play a lot of games, and their friends at school like, well, why didn't you do this last night? Why weren't you on Minecraft? Why weren't you on whatever game they're playing? I have one who's going to be almost 16. Last year, he got his first phone. We have no personal computers that they have for themselves. They don't have video games. They don't have TVs in their room. And their friends look at them like they have three heads. You know, I can't win either way.
May I respond? I've said for years, but again, we're so busy, but I think it's imperative, the younger the kids, the more effective, but to have luncheons and barbecues with their friends' parents and name this elephant. Like, is your kid kind of addicted to the screen, and are you struggling? And there's something about maybe, I don't know, airing our dirty laundry that is difficult, but I think we've got to do that because, you know, the norm back in the day was most of my friend group and your friend groups, we had the same norms. We would challenge it once in a while, but my friends weren't driving Corvettes when they were 17.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got a crappy used Toyota and I was happy with it. But right when everybody's on their gizmo, the gizmo is the medium through which these kids conduct their whole life.
Right.
And so the more parents that get on this wagon train in these little friend groups, in the 5th grade at Goffstown Elementary, in these little communities, right? The more success we're going to have. I'm looking at these comments, one from Nathan Coolidge. How do we pull back when we have always pushed forward? And I think, and far more, is Mr. Coolidge around? How do we pull back when we've always pushed forward? Is Nathan Coolidge on the call?
Well, yes, I'm here. Hi, I'm Denise.
Okay, well, Nathan, go ahead.
Just the idea of, you know, we've always pushed forward. We're always looking to the next thing, just like those students were saying. And how do we begin to say, you know, we are still moving forward, but we're going to back up a little bit. We're gonna take it back with the technology and the devices, and I don't know, just something to think about.
I think it's brilliant, and there's so much to talk about, right? And that's why we're having 10 sessions.
Mhm.
And I know that John and Abby and Miranda and I want to build a consortium of grownups that want to keep this conversation going, because we have a national challenge. And the more of us that pull back and have treasure hunts with 5th graders, the more the 5th graders are going to go, I don't really want to be on this gizmo. It's boring. You know, if you watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix, you know how calculating Mark Zuckerberg and these guys are, right? So Donna's phone, 11 Pro Max. I have 5 children ranging from 33 to 11, and times are different. I've seen the transition. The peer pressure is relentless. Donna, IMAX, Pro Max 11. Did you want to say anything, Donna?
Yeah, I can say that I've seen the transition for sure. You know, when my 33-year-old, they were just coming out with those, you know, little flip phones, and we just used them for, you know, call me when you're done practice. And now it's my son, my other 2 smaller ones, they don't have their phones ever So they never really have been impacted by the phone situations, I can say. They do like to play with them at home, but once in a blue moon, my husband and I are super old fashioned.
Good.
Super old fashioned where we don't, we just don't allow them. They have a 2-hour block, and I also see them having like anxiety over that. And it's real anxiety. They'll say, can I please? Can I please? And it's like, no, I'm sorry. You can't. It's not that they even have it. They know it's there. So it's a problem for sure. And I know that schools used to ask the kids, hey, do you have your phone? You can look it up. Do you have your phone? You can look it up. Because they didn't have their computer, their Google laptop, but they had the Google on their phone. So it became a conflict of interest for a little bit. And then I was like, well, you're not bringing your phone for sure, because I don't want you on the screen all the time. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that there was a big transition. My kids all have a phone, but they're very cautious about when they're using it.
Well, Donna, let me say two things. One, if you have kids from 11 to 33, the judge and I would like to come over and help you. But the second thing is people are posting about how do you pull back when the technology is necessary for school, the schools allow phones, and these aren't easy problems to solve.
No, they're right in front of you. They're there all the time. You just gotta try to teach your children. And this is like from the very, very beginning. My husband and I were just like, look, we understand. We know it's hard. We understand, and we're going to give you time, and we're going to give you, as much. We just need to try to give them that, that backbone of you don't need to have what everybody else has, and you have resources available to you, and you can do this on your own. You don't need to have technology in front of you at all times, because eventually it'll cause a problem.
Yeah, and the chat is super interesting about the conflicts that we need technology literacy in the workplace. But I want to respect the clock that we only have 2 minutes left. I know John and I, and if Abby, you can, and I'm happy to stay on here if people want to continue to talk. I do before we run out of time, though, in the interest of respecting the hour. I hope, Abby, I think we can cut and paste this chat. Maybe there's some real gems in there. We will be here. We will be here. I think it's in 2 weeks from tonight. I'll put my email again in this thing. Contact me if you have any questions or thoughts. I mean, the main event for me is that this was a really, really good beginning. There are 78 people still on this call who could be on their iPhone or doing whatever they needed to do. And I really am unbelievably grateful for this, because John Broderick has long said, if we don't close the corral, the four-sided corral with the parent end, we can never help all these kids with wet eyes whom he's hugged, and these children whose moms are calling me, can you bail my kid out? He's in a deep hole. We want to get this Reconnection Project off the ground. If any of you folks needs to be in touch with us, John has already driven 90,000 miles. We'll take wagon, train, bicycles, anywhere to talk to parents, to talk to kids, to talk to educators. So if I've missed something, please.
Hey, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Can I just close out with this? This has been a great evening. I have really come to know this generation of kids, middle school through high school, and I love these kids. I mean that sincerely. They are amazing people. And so everything we've been saying tonight should not be seen as negative towards them, but they are a product of the petri dish in which they're living, as Jeff pointed out. And one of the things I see, and you'll notice it too, you probably already have, and I saw some of the chats here about being outside and playing in the neighborhood. You don't see that much anymore. Kids are somewhere in their basement or in their room, they're on a phone or an iPad. That's not healthy at a point, and they feel pressures that I never felt. And I wanted to do well in school, but my parents weren't pressuring me, and I didn't feel a cultural pressure. And parents are great. It's not a question of parents not being good parents, but we're all victimized by all the stuff going on around us. And most parents, whether they'll acknowledge it or not, maybe as addicted to their iPhones as their kids. And as Jeff said earlier, kids model what they see. And so maybe the best way to change the kids' behavior is to start to model a different use of technology in your own world. And I'm not anti-tech. I have an iPad and an iPhone, but I didn't grow up in that world. And it's an addition to what I've done and know. It's not who I am. That's really important, I think. Hard, trust me, I know that. But there's strength in numbers. If it's one parent, that's one thing. But if it's all the parents, at least all the parents in the neighborhood, there's a lot of strength in that. And I applaud what Jeff said about having parents talk to each other, because whatever the issues are in your house, trust me, they exist in the neighborhood. And I think if parents started talking and maybe kids started to see that everyone's starting to understand what some of their challenges are, change might come. But if we don't change, I'm going to keep hugging kids who are crying. And it's just not right, actually. And we can fix it if we want. We actually can fix it if we want.
Judge, thanks. I just want to acknowledge Jennifer and Tracy on here we're talking about neurotypical kids, and that neurotypical kids are suffering greatly. I just want to acknowledge what they're talking about. Kids with special needs, trying to keep up with neurotypical kids. It's on here. So, and yeah, so I want to respect the thing and stop. If people want to stay on the call, I mean, I'm happy to stay on here. And we thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who said, hey, we're looking forward to the next one. I think John and I could use some acknowledgement too. We've been sort of shouting into dark places and trying to get this off the ground. And I want to thank the educators, Frank and John and different people. I can't see everybody, Larry. I can't see everybody, but thank you for entertaining the judge and me coming to your school. And we want to do more of it. Be the change you wish to see. Donna's phone, 11 Pro Max, yes. So I guess that's about it. I'll stay on, but meeting is officially ended. Judge, would you bang the gavel? I mean, you still have the New Hampshire gavel going.
No, I have no authority anymore, Jeff.